All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Fresh Brains Campus Manager podcast series. Today we have Lauren. Before I introduce Lauren, just quickly, as you guys know, I'm Santi. I am the Associate Director of Campus Manager Operations here at Fresh Brains, essentially handling all the teams that recruit, interview, and train our CMs. And as I said, we have Lauren here today, who has been a campus manager for 3+ years, which is a rare longevity for the role. And we're going to get into all of that with Lauren. But before we get to all of that, Lauren, just quickly tell us who you are, where do you go to school, how long you've been a CM, what your major is, all that good stuff. The elevator pitch from Lauren.
Absolutely. Well, hi everyone. My name is Lauren. I am so fortunate to have been a campus manager for over 3 years. I'm a senior at Duke University. I'm pursuing a self-design program in economics and Asian American community health, and I'll be going full-time into consumer and retail consulting. So excited to get a head start on telling you all how I built this career with Fresh Prince, but also how Fresh Prince has helped me in many different ways beyond just the design portal and beyond just their design tool.
Yeah, so you touched on Fresh Prince on your freshman, your sophomore, your junior, and now your senior year, correct?
Yes, started my freshman summer. I remember in New York, back home on the training modules, in New York City. So it's been a long ride.
What do you remember from training? Actually, this is not part of the questions we'll ask you, but it's changed a lot. But like, do you recall anything from it?
Absolutely. I remember at first, I think there was a part of me that was hesitant because it was a lot of work. There was these set of modules. I remember I had a training manager who was texting me like, "Can you please submit this on time? Can you post this on Instagram?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Like I have no idea what I'm doing here, but I'm willing to learn." Soon and as the years progressed, I realized that the training is made in the way. It is. It is so thorough and comprehensive because it truly does prepare you for being a campus manager. On a personal note, I have actually helped with some of the training now. So one of my friends who's going through campus manager training sent me a picture of my face, and it was of me talking about my experiences as a campus manager, as well as navigating some of our tools that we offer. So certainly it's changed, but I think as going from when I was a freshman summer till now, I've seen how valuable the training is, and I do remember it because I was sitting in New York at a sample sale line. You wait for like hours, and everyone was there like talking about what they were going to buy, and I was just sitting there on my computer doing my trainings. So great memory.
Love
Just
that. Love that very vivid memory of your training. And glad you stuck around, and not only you stuck around for training, but for 4 years. That's very rare for you all out there. Why did you stay all this time?
Absolutely. I think there are three main reasons why I stayed for 4 years and why these 4 years have flown by so fast. The first one is really the entrepreneurial aspect of Fresh Prince and of building your own merch business. I remember in job interviews, I remember on personal aspects, even when applying for postgraduate programs, I think having being able to say that you produce top line revenue growth at such an incredible scale is unique across all undergraduate campuses. So the ability to create something was first and foremost what has tied me to Fresh Prince and has kept me going over the past 4 years. Every year I have new clients, every year I have more great ideas. And certainly that's probably the first main reason. The second one ties to that, and that's my commitment to bringing my clients' visions to life. And I have a set of clients that I see every year. Their merch chairs change, but I don't. And so each of them has their personal brand and vision. And I'm really committed to bringing that to life. And because I know the products, because I know how Fresh Prince works, and because I know these clients themselves and their general brand or vibe, I'm able to produce something great for each of them every year. And then I think the final note is building community on campus. I think merch is such a huge part of every organization, and being able to demonstrate and visualize an organization's personal brand is unique and nearly impossible for any other company besides someone who deals with merch.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It is about finding the right designs, the right items to correctly express what that organization stands for and wants to be looked as, right? But you mentioned, talking about Fresh Prince in your interviews and things that you've had. Now you're heading into your spring semester of your senior year. If an interviewer would ask you, "What are you known for as a CM?" What would you say to that?
Absolutely. I actually have probably answered that question on multiple occasions. And I would say it does, again, kind of go into a multi-part reputation. I think the first, again, is really that bespoke and thoughtful process that I bring. So most of the clients with whom I work, either I've worked with them for a long time since sophomore year, or they come to me and they say, "Hey, I know you're the merch girl on campus. Can you help me with this new drop?" And so the reason why they come to me is because they know that I will see their vision through. So that's where the bespoke nature of my service comes in. But I'm also comprehensive. So I make sure that from the beginning to the end, I am with them. I'm not holding their hand necessarily, but I'm making sure that every question they have is addressed. I'm making sure that every item that they want is included in the drop. I'm making sure that I'm coordinating with logistics and finance and licensing to ensure that they get the best experience with the least number of hassles. And the final note I will say is unconventional designs are a big part of my experience as a campus manager. A lot of my huge drops are massive because they are unique items. They are items that we completely created. We did a collab with, a producer or a supplier that with whom we've never worked. I mean, I have claw clips, tote bags, stickers, keychains, all those items, those promo items that you wouldn't necessarily normally associate with merchandise. So I think that's what I would be known as. And certainly what I would tell an interviewer is on campus, it has made a huge impact. And I don't think I would have been able to make a similar impact in any other role beyond being a campus manager.
Love that. So well put. And look, we haven't worked closely aside from those training videos that we did together, but I can vouch for your attention to detail, which is one of the things that you brought there. When we talked to Lakin about like, hey, talk to us about some CMs that are really special, that really have like cool stories. What she said was like, Lauren is, attention to detail is second to none. Lakin, your DM, has managed hundreds of CMs over the years, and for her to say something like that, I can really, really trust that. And that's awesome. And it is part of community building as well. At the end of the day, feeling part of all of that is really what's special, and bringing those visions to life. It's a luxury, I'm sure, for those merch chairs to work with such an experienced campus manager like you. But let's take it back to your early days, Lauren, when you started at Fresh Prince. Again, this is April 2023, I believe, that you started training. What did you underestimate about the role early on, if you can take me back?
Absolutely. I think when I think about underestimation of the role, it boils down to what I underestimated in the campus manager role myself, and what I underestimated about my clients. So I think what I first underestimated about myself was I thought I would have a lot more time. I thought that merch would be easy in many ways, but there's so much that goes into the process, whether it's literally creating the design and working with art team, or bringing it to the final route, right? Saying, what items do we want? Is the fit of the shirt going to be what the client needs? Do I like the color? What about the type of print? All these questions that go into producing a merch drop. And so that's what I underestimated at first, was the amount of time that I would have to dedicate, but also want to dedicate to the role. But when I talk about clients, a lot of the clients with whom I work are my friends. I know them personally. They reach out to me casually. They're excited to work with me and will work with me in a professional context, but we're friends first. What I didn't realize is how high people's demands can be. I've had multiple conflicts where maybe a client says, "Oh, well, I know you said that this item might be a bit more delayed based on overseas shipping and whatnot, but we really needed it by this date." And I have to push back and say, "Well, you didn't clarify the date ahead of time. We're happy to expedite as much as we can." Different order resolutions around this type of situation. The large point is I have learned to separate in some contexts between a client and a friend. And that has
Very
allowed me
difficult to
to have
do.
better
Very difficult to do.
service, but it's
Yeah.
also definitely been a consideration of mine because it's difficult. It's always difficult to manage clients, and even more so when they're your close friends.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. That initially you thought merch was easy, and that you don't really understand the degree of complexity that goes into some of these very complicated large orders that you're actually known for. Did some of this underestimation that you had early on, did it ever result in a mess up or a mistake that you made or something where you came up short? Do you remember any instance like this?
Yes, I can definitely recall early instances where lack of experience contributed to a subpar result. So when I was when I was a sophomore, when I was really getting into the swing of things, I had a couple large orders in the spring. So by that point, I was an established campus manager. I had a couple orders under my belt, but I was still getting used to the process of being a campus manager and leading a merch drop, collecting payments, etc. For one of the big fraternity drops, and some of them are very organized, some of them less so. They did not have anyone designated to hand out the merch. They didn't have anyone designated to collect payments. So that became a me problem, which I loved and I was very happy to do. I love seeing the merch. I love people coming up to me and handing that out. But when I was handing out merchandise, and I'm glad I was the one doing it because it saved a lot of time and confusion, I
Oh
realized
no.
that there was a complete size missing. And I was like, I looked at the spreadsheet. I said, I thought I did this correctly. I said, the box doesn't have these sizes. And I said, okay, we're missing, it was like 8 mediums or something to that effect. And we had 8 larges instead. And I was like, I don't know how that happened. I went to the order page And what I must have done, or what I did do, was because sizes are sequentially listed. So you might have small, medium, large, extra large. But on the form, there was one size missing. So no one had ordered, for example, right, a
Right.
large, and they had
Right.
ordered a medium instead. I had missed a complete size. The funny part about that was that I was very transparent. I told the boys at this fraternity, hey, by the way, we have the wrong sizes. I'm happy to schedule a replacement. This was totally on me. All the forms were correct, but it was placed incorrectly. And the boys were actually really happy with the fit of the size that we ordered. So every guy, so those 8 boys who had ordered that shirt, even despite us telling them that the size was incorrect, were happy with the shirt. But the point is, in that order resolution, I was very willing to provide all these different options, but we still found a solution that worked for the client. So that was certainly an early mess up that I still think about and still like shake my head about. But now Freshman's has those checks and balances in place. So a mistake, quote unquote, like that is not even possible anymore.
Yeah, and I didn't know the story, and that's it's funny, but also I'm glad that it worked out. But do you think? I think it was so important that at the beginning you immediately acknowledged the mistake, right? It was on me. You
Yes.
broke the news to them, I'm sure, in a very empathetic way. And I don't know if the boys would have still chosen the shirts as they came, but like I'm sure your attitude and your approach to it helped them be more understanding of your mistake. Do you think it had any effect in how they reacted to the whole thing?
Transparency and honesty are so important in this business, and I think it's
Yeah.
because it's so based on outside factors. So whether it's tariffs now or whether it's an overseas supplier, sometimes delays are inevitable. Sometimes you get a product that maybe the printer miscommunicated, right, with Fresh Prints itself. And so it always is a process of open lines of communication, and most clients are very open to understanding and being empathetic as long as you are open yourself. So like I think in that situation, it was an order resolution that worked well, but it was contingent upon the fact that I understood what went wrong, but I told them as soon as I knew what went wrong that something is happening and that we are willing to take the steps immediately to address said situation.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a good lesson to learn early on in the role. Um, but you mentioned you at that point at that point in time for that big order that you were just starting out, you were establishing yourself. Were experiences like this where you had to really own up to something and fix mistakes that you had made? Is that when you started acting more like a business owner than a student? Because we love to say that our campus managers are really mini custom apparel business owners, right? And they need to operate and think like that. That's very different than just being a student and doing the side hustle, right? That's not what this is. Were experiences like this early on what taught you really to treat this as your own mini business that you need to protect and do everything you can to keep your clients happy and to keep your operation going?
Yes. I would say that when I took ownership and when I do take ownership for my mistakes, I am acknowledging that while I'm working for Fresh Prince, the business with which I am working is a reflection on my own character and on my own abilities to run said business. So mistakes like these, and I think the associated ownership are what drives someone's consideration of an entrepreneurial business rather than a side hustle. I think truly it did start as a job. It was a part-time job for me. I said, this sounds like something that's super fun. I love designing merchandise, but I didn't see it turning into something that's a huge part of my identity on campus and off campus. So I think, yes, mistakes have helped me shape that. And they've also taught me about accountability and process changing. So one of the things that I do now is I have a spreadsheet, as we do with every Google form order or whatnot. But my spreadsheet is particularly organized because I use a lot of formulas, and I use the same formulas to essentially double check the amount that every item is, right? How many items, the quantity of them, each size by itself, and then I make sure everything adds up correctly. In addition to pricing line by line for each individual customer within that specific chapter. So, because of these forms, because of these mistakes, I have built a lot of ownership into my own entrepreneurial business on campus. And I will say that while it starts with mistakes, the only way that it becomes truly meaningful, those mistakes, is when they transform into real action that
Mhm.
addresses those previous challenges.
Definitely, definitely, great introspect that you need to have on why did this happen and how can I make it better next time. And that's how a true business owner operates. And one of the
Right.
things you're also known for, Lauren, are your large orders. You recently closed on a $27,000 general merch order. Talk to us about initially what is this relationship with this client? How did the opportunity came about?
So this client is one of my long-standing 3-year clients that I've worked with over and over again. This includes fall drop, spring drop, a formal drop, beach week, all these different occasions that prove multiple times that you are the right, meaning Fresh Prince and me are the right client, are the right people with whom this client wants to work. So I feel that there was a lot of trust already built into this relationship. The campus manager, me, and the client knew each other very well. but there were new merch chairs. So there's still an introduction of
Mm.
volatility, of originality, and newness that always needs to be balanced with trust. And so I utilized previous drops and my knowledge about what this chapter had previously done. This chapter is the sorority at Duke, and said, this is what you all have previously done. This is what has done well in terms of order quantity, in terms of actually getting produced, and then satisfaction when it arrives. And here's what we can do this semester that builds upon that brand, but then also introduces something completely new and original. So I was using trends from today, but also trends from the past 3 years for this chapter specifically to build a truly original drop for them this semester. I also say, because we know this client very well and we've worked with them, they were able to trust us in creating made to order items. So whether it was a color block mock neck or again a claw clip, they were able to trust us even if they didn't see precedent with certain items, even if it was minimum 50 orders. And so because there was built-in trust, we were able to bring that drop over the finish line. And I would say some of the main moving parts within this huge massive order, and as have been with previous ones, is really keeping account of every individual person. So every individual drop for these ones, typically there could be 150 orders. And each person, even though it's just one Google form, sometimes they text me and say, oh, I missed, or I missized this item, or oh, I didn't mean to add that. Could I delete it? Right. And it's really hard to keep track of all of these different requests across 150 people who ordered. So I definitely have been learning that over the past 3 years, but given the past track record of working with such big orders and having them all delivered without an issue, have certainly allowed me to make this order, for example, possible.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. How much goes into these large orders, and you're basically describing the job of a merch chair, right? You're going into talking to every single member of the organization and making sure their sizes are right and their forms are submitted on time. How many parts were involved in this order aside from you interacting with 100 plus members of a chapter? Talk to me about also how the internal teams at Fresh Prince helped you bring this order to life.
Yeah. I think one of, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of what makes my campus manager experience unique and that bespoke comprehensive service I mentioned, the reason why it is so comprehensive is because, again, I'm not the merch chair, but I do help the merch chair significantly. So some other campus managers I know don't necessarily collect the finances or create the sheets and talk to every individual member, but that's something that I've been able to provide for my clients because I have a really good formula going, and it is pretty simple for me to collect all the merch payments, so our invoices get paid earlier than usual. So it's nice to have that extra layer of accountability. But in terms of what goes into the merch order, all of the teams at Fresh Prince are so responsive and integrated in this whole merge process. So the first step might be, of course, submitting some proofs on the portal, having art team look into my crazy requests and bringing it to life. And that might require a couple emails back and forth. I'll send a couple reference photos and say, please mock it up as requested. I promise I'll talk to licensing, but it works. That exchange is so fruitful. The second step on working with a Fresh Prince internal team oftentimes is logistics. So let's say art team says, okay, we don't know if we can do this. We're going to mock it up for you because you begged for it, but we're going to make sure that you have to make sure it's possible. So then I'll
Yeah,
go to
like, we
logistics.
work with you, Lauren. We trust you at this point
Yeah.
as well, just like your clients do.
But I'm like, okay, logistics, can you please make this possible? Is this even tangible? Right? Like, is this something that we can do for our client? And the answer is almost always yes. It just depends on the quantity, right? The supplier, all of these sorts of considerations that logistics will bring up to me that I will bring to the client. So after logistics and I talk back and forth, I get approval for the merch item. I go to art team. I say, yes, this is approved. Can we like make sure that this is good to go? After those two, the next step a lot of times for Greek organizations is working with licensing. And even in this large 27K order, there obviously are questions about licensing. Every single one of those items has the chapter's mark on them. So I'm also communicating with licensing and saying, hey, if this item isn't approved, right, what can we do to make sure that it still maintains the same vibe or energy that the client wants without infringing upon our licensing requirements? And so
Mhm.
those three teams are primarily what's going into the design and brainstorming process. And then finally, I obviously connect with finance team and make sure that the invoice is paid off correctly. If there are any discounts for promo codes, we'll organize it there. And then, I mean, most importantly is working with my manager, Lakin. She's awesome. And she is there every time I have a question. I frequently text her when I should definitely be texting logistics. And she's like, I can give you a potential answer, but maybe ask logistics for a more formal one. But she is willing to
Right.
field all of my crazy requests.
Yeah, definitely with her experience, I'm sure she can answer some of these questions easily. And
Yes.
that's the kind of support that our BDMs are, give our campus managers on an ongoing basis. All BDMs, as we know, are all former campus managers who were in the role themselves and find success. And now their role is to really instill these good habits and skills and things that they learn in the position themselves onto their own team of campus managers. And it's really special to see the kind of relationship that you have built with Lakin. Were you always under Lakin, or did you switch up always all 3+ years
Yes.
under Lakin?
Oh, yes. Since the day I started, meaning actually
Talk
after
talk to me
training.
about talk to me about you guys' relationship.
Yes. So I will say I am one to be up at the oddest hours, and I'll be going to sleep at like what 4 a.m. and she'll be waking up for her Pilates class. So sometimes that schedule works out. Typically, I would recommend anyone listening, if you are communicating with your manager, try to communicate during the regular hours
Yeah,
of the day.
be thoughtful.
However,
Yeah, be
Lakin and I
mindful.
know each other and have known each other for a long time. And sometimes I'm about to place this massive order, but I have two quick questions. And she is so responsive and engaging with me. And I think she is incredibly knowledgeable, and I do respect and trust her. So oftentimes, I think the largest conversations that we have tend to be order resolutions. And so that's in case, for example, I know for my chapter, we recently had a large order and I was wondering about the fit of a tank top. I didn't have a sample. We didn't really have time to get that in. And so I was asking like, okay, are there pictures you can send me of the tank top? Do you personally have a sample? Do we have the measurements? And she was going back and forth between upper levels of leadership at Fresh Prince and me, as well as just making sure that the client was happy. And I think that level of detail from her really complements my attention to detail, because we're both focused on the nitty gritty of the merch drop and the small moments that if you didn't know that we were addressing, you would never bring up. So a lot of times we prevent order resolutions, we prevent order issues by being incredibly diligent early on. And I would say the relationship between the two of us is completely open. Like I ask her about every item possible. I'm saying, okay, can I send the sample to this person? Right? Are there rules? Or do you know if the licensing will approve this? And a lot of times it's me bouncing ideas off of her as a soundboard because I trust her so
Right.
much. And as experienced as I am, she is infinitely more. So I think
Yeah.
it's a very cohesive relationship and also comprehensive between the two of us.
Love that. Just like I can vouch for your attention to detail, so I can for Lakin's. Every year, just a bit of behind the scenes, like full-time team dynamics here. For everyone in the audience, we go on these yearly retreats. For everyone in the Fresh Prince full-time team, Lakin is who keeps us organized,
Yeah.
and that we get to do every activity that we set out to do on these like very condensed 3-day retreats that we have once a year. She's kind of like the person who keeps us on schedule, and I can really see how organized and how attentive to detail she is, and how much she cares about getting the outcome that she envisions for something. Really somebody who has a lot of drive, and I can see a lot of that in you as well, with these complicated orders that you make happen just like that. And it looks like the things that you have done, and you've mentioned in this episode, like you pretty much cracked the code on how to get these really large orders successfully across the finish line. If there's a current campus manager out there that is like about to face their first big order, what are some of, in specifically, Lauren, like what are some of the things that you recommend that they do with like organizing everything and in doing so in a timely manner?
Yes, I think this is such a great question because I've recently been giving a lot of advice to incoming campus managers about how to manage these large orders. I mean, a lot of these campus managers at Duke specifically will be inheriting big clients. These are clients with those 27K orders twice a year. And I primarily, the first thing I teach campus managers, incoming ones, is how to manage that order form, because that's the first point of contact with your client and their customers, meaning everyone in that chapter or organization. And so both in the building of that form and in the management of the responses afterward have to be incredibly, again, detail oriented, but also systematic, because oftentimes they'll be expecting that same form every semester with the same disclaimers, like you should pay by this date, we'll request it from this account, you'll pick up at this location. And so I would say the main advice for an incoming campus manager, especially if they're about to place such a large order, is managing that individual point of contact with the client. And that's meaning with the client in their organization, because that's what the organization sees. And it's a reflection both on the client themselves, but then also on you by being the liaison between Fresh Prince and the client and their organization
Right.
members. So building out that toolkit and understanding, how do you create this form is important. And then I would say the additional aspect is understanding the product. So both Fresh Prince as a platform, but then also the products that we're offering. So we have access to all these suppliers. Personally, I can tell you most of them by the back of my hand and what they offer. I can tell you LA Apparel, what my favorite products are from there. I can tell you about ones that we don't use as frequently, like OTL Apparel is something that we don't use as frequently, but I've had products from there. And the point is just knowing all of the offerings available will also feed into that building of that form and that interaction between the client and you.
And how can they make they do more research on these products? Like, what tools do you use to like learn more about, other than like trying them out and selling them and seeing them in person?
We have an
What kind of
awesome, I was just gonna say, we
yeah
have an awesome platform called Help Juice. And
yeah
I would say that that is one of Freshman's, incredibly unique offerings and just so helpful because, as the name suggests, Help Juice. When you click on that platform, they have a million, I don't know how many exactly, but like tons and tons of articles that basically tell me everything I need to know, whether it's, again, licensing for my specific chapter, what can we use, what symbols can we not, what are some previous proofs that have been submitted that were rejected by licensing, all the way to information on the products themselves. So we have a lot of made to order custom garments through Fresh Prince exclusives. I can go in the portal and say, what are the custom colors that we can offer? I mean, there's I think there's probably 50 of them. And I can look at all the color code swatches. I can say, what are the printing limitations, the minimum quantity ordered, what designs can I do on this product? So I think Help Juice is probably my main source and the main recommendation for new campus managers. And then the second one would be logistics or their own BDMs.
Yeah, and what's fascinating to me to hear about when you talk about these orders is that you have so much knowledge about our product that pretty much. And correct me if I'm wrong though, but like you're the one who is pretty much choosing the products for your customers, right? Right?
Yeah.
Is that how it works out most of the time? That you're like,
Yes,
trust me
they
on this.
ask me,
I
they're
know
like,
this
this
is
is
gonna
my
look great.
vision. And they say,
Yeah,
this is my vision. Find me something that works for the vision. And I say, okay, on it.
yeah,
And
love
that's
that. That
fun.
is
I mean, I love being able to choose a product that they'll love.
yeah, and it just makes the work more exciting, right? Like you can actually say you're the author of all of those things, and how much a sense of accomplishment you might have you have, I'm sure, with some of these large orders. But switching on more to like who could be a good fit for this role. We talk about a lot in my team when we talk to potential candidates, like what kind of people thrive here, what should you be prepared to do. But in your perspective, now you've been in the role for 3+ years, what type of student, what type of person do you think is a good long-term fit for this position?
The funny thing is, I think there's so many students I see. Just being an undergraduate student qualifies you to be a good campus manager. It's a learned role, but it's also built on drive and an ability to be a self starter. So I think the first category that I would highlight is entrepreneurial. I never view myself as entrepreneurial coming into Duke. I said, I'm not a risk taker. I don't want to start my own business. Like, I like the safe aspect of joining clubs that are already established and yes, making them great, but building upon something that's already been created. And
Right.
I think coming into the role, I realized that I do have this entrepreneurial drive. I do want to create something great. And whether it's from the ground up or from, a place where it's an established club for 20 years, I think that drive is still translatable across both spheres. And so whether it's a student leader from high school or someone who is interested in being a self-starter and driving their own personal brand on a larger national scale, those are going to be successful in the campus manager role. And then I would also say someone who's very personable. A lot of my clients in the beginning chose me over perhaps more established merch companies that they had worked with for years prior because they knew me and they wanted to work with me, regardless of at Duke, for context, we don't print Duke marks because Duke has a very complicated licensing system and Greek Life is affiliated with Duke. So because of that, a lot of organizations, Greek Life would actually choose Fresh Prince and to work with me over working with perhaps another organization that would print Duke marks or
Right.
had been working with them for years before. So it's proving your value proposition. And I think that happens for individuals who are willing to manage clients and be personable and open and communicative.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hone in on something that you mentioned earlier. You discovering that you do have a true entrepreneurial spirit, and what a discovery to have, at this age early on, where you can really, in your next stage in life, be able to put that into motion and to try it out. Has this experience and this discovery that you have had it shaped in any way what you will choose to do next after you graduate this spring?
Yes, 1,000%. I mean, what I mentioned earlier is I'll be going into consumer and retail consulting full time. I interned there last summer as well. And when I was recruiting for roles, one of the main drivers was what do I love about my current extracurricular involvements? My major is in health economics. My personal interests are consumer and retail. On campus, I'm doing leadership roles. I said, what brings us all together? And it comes with building community and building access. So whether it's merchandise and building something that relates to a person's or organization's personal brand, or again, building access to healthcare, which is what I do in my academic life. All of those kind of converge together to create this drive and this meaning behind Fresh Prince and my involvement on an entrepreneurial side. But yes, it is completely defined what I'm doing in my future career. I mean, next year I'll be back in consumer and retail. And one of my main drivers in my interview process was talking about having an operator background and experience with a Fresh Prince. Most other candidates did not have that. And
Right.
so I think knowing the tangibility and the impact that any sort of self-starting business and merchandise can provide has allowed me to define what I want to do in the next at least 2 years, maybe even more of my life.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And um, that's not a line item on your resume, right? That's a story that you were able to really leverage and use and as proof that you are a successful operator that can connect consumers, in this case, like
Mhm.
students that need merch, to brands, in this case, Fresh Prince. And that has such a huge value for employers and people that are looking to, to bring the next generation of leaders into their businesses. That's very cool, Lauren. I love that all of that has influenced you. And I love that you have made so much out of this experience for 3+ years. Just to wrap it all up, if you could compress these 4 years into a single lesson. It could be anything. It could be personal related. It could be more generic. What is that lesson? What have you learned that has stood out to you the most through this experience?
Yeah, wow. Learned so much. I think the
Stumped you.
main advice and the main takeaway is, and this is perhaps redundant with a lot of other lessons that people learn from their first job or an entrepreneurial engagement, but it really is get comfortable with discomfort and to do your due diligence. And to elaborate a bit, that is really the main the takeaway, the soundbite there. But the reason I've had these large drops, the reason I've had such success is because I push the boundaries of what we even created. And Fresh Prince is a crazy amount of items. We're a custom apparel business. But I've said I want to make custom PJs that look exactly like these my two favorite brands. And now we offer PJs on the portal, and we have I like a dedicated supplier. I said I want claw clips, but I want to make sure that we can do them in any color and that we have rhinestones on them. Right now we have a supplier for that. And so when you think outside the box and when you get comfortable with doing so, that's when the greatest results occur. And I've had a lot of pushback. There's sometimes when things aren't possible. Like someone wanted a trench coat. We could do that, but you can't do that with 20 units on a 2 week timeline. So a lot of times it's really balancing between finding what the best that we can provide and then pushing even further than that.
Love that. Great sound bites at the end as well. Um, Thank you so much, Lauren. This has been very cool for me to get to hear all behind the scenes and how you made all this magic happen. Wish you best of luck in your last couple months as a campus manager. I'm sure you're gonna kill it out there. If you're back in the city, we'll connect at some point with the rest of the Freshmen's team as well. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so great to chat.